Hello, everybody. Welcome back. We are the two Unholy Healers. I'm Colleen O'Brien. This is my co-host, Karen Lee. And together we are professional healers. We are business owners, solopreneurs, published authors, and a whole bunch of other things because, we're experienced women. and we get together every other week to talk shop, talk about healing, talk about our own experiences. And this week, we've got a really juicy topic. It is illness as transformation. Because as healers, a lot of us come into healing because we were feeling dis-ease, like we weren't something wasn't right and stuff wasn't working, and so it was something that we were willing to try. And we also do work with clients, or have worked with clients who also had, when we think of illness, we usually think of like medical stuff, but sometimes you can think of illness too as like other stuff that's just not right in your world. But often there is an opportunity to transform when illness presents itself in your reality. But I think when Karen and I first talked about having this be a topic, we were like, you know what? This is kind of bullshit. Like, I don't want things to have to get really bad for me to have to change or have something different happen in my life. Or,
Yeah.
So we'll see where this conversation goes. But that was my original sort of take on it, introduction to it. So, Karen, what direction would you like to take this illness as transformation topic today?
Okay, thanks, Colleen. Hello, everyone. I think, that's exactly where our conversation began when we first sort of chose this topic. And we certainly, as a collective of beings, have chosen to learn through struggle, hardship, illness, all that sort of thing. This reality thrives on it. You know what I mean? Like, even in the spiritual community, it's like, oh, you have this lesson to learn through this illness or this struggle, right? And we've fed on that for generations, but even let's say, even longer, right? So is that actually required as we move forward into a higher level of consciousness? Because my perspective is that what I've seen of actual physical contact with non-earth beings as an example of what is possible and how we can still grow and evolve, but not through illness, struggle, and suffering. Because there is almost like a perception that if we don't struggle, then we don't grow. But what I've seen and heard from the, conversations with people who've had actual physical contact with non-earth beings, so this is not just channeled information, is that these beings do evolve and grow, but not through hardship. It comes from a completely different space. And so I really believe and feel that there is a whole different way to grow and evolve, and it starts with empowerment. And we kind of tapped into this a little bit in the conversation we had about the future of healing, where instead of sort of fix, save, heal people, it's more about empowering people. Exactly the same with this conversation. We're moving into a space where we can make different choices, and it's almost like recognizing, okay, I've gone into struggle here, I've gone into illness. Why am I choosing this illness? Oh, wait a minute, I actually have a choice here. Could I possibly choose something greater? Could I create something greater? And from my own experience, I've found that the more I've been willing to let go of the illness or the struggle or the hardship, and recognize that choice. Well, you can have that illness if you want, or what if I could create something different? The more I've been willing to step into that, the more I've actually started creating something greater in my life, because we're always creating, but it's really about choosing to create beyond this reality. So, and I'll just sort of reiterate that last little bit. We can focus on the lessons, or we can create beyond this reality. So that's sort of where I will hand it over to you.
Well, and that reminds me of it's stepping into mastery almost, right?
Yeah,
Because pain in and of itself or dis-ease is a message. It's a signal. It's an indicator. Like,
yeah,
and when you first start, or even before you come to realize you're an energetic being and you have tools and you have ways of dealing with it, or even recognizing it, sometimes that pain's got to get really loud. And now I know I'm way more attuned to the nuances of
mm,
like, ooh, it doesn't have to scream at me anymore. It can just sort
yeah,
of like tug and be like, hey, like hey,
yeah,
like pay attention to me. I got something that isn't, and
yeah,
so you can course correct a lot more easily rather than having to do these big swings,
yeah,
because so many times this illness's transformation it's that drama. It's almost a narrative device. Like, how many autobiographies have you seen where they get really, really sick? They have some terrible, terrible terminal illness that's incurable. And
yeah,
then, they had this experience, this one instance, and everything changed and flipped, which that's wonderful for that person to have had that experience. But I don't think it has to be that dramatic. And
yeah,
honestly, that sort of thing can happen all the time. As you said, you can choose. You're constantly creating and
yeah,
getting that feedback. And so becoming aware of the messages that you're receiving and what reality you want to create for yourself, what experience you want to have for yourself, and then where you
mm,
get to steer yourself and your attention
yeah,
is really how you can become a master of this life. And I don't think you have to suffer to do that.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. And also, just to add on to what you're saying there, a lot of people like the trauma and drama that, and they hold on to that stuff. In
And
fact,
then they tell the story over and they
yes, over and
relive it
over.
over
Yeah,
and over again. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And I was just going to say there was an example of, let's say, a well-known person in the, let's say, music industry, who I remember seeing some 30 odd years ago, who had a lot of trauma drama at the time, but an incredibly creative person. And then I happened to see them on TV again, like 30 or whatever years it was later, still the same energy. Still, I could see, still holding on to all of this baggage from the past. And I just thought, wow, what an amazing creation to actually have had all that pain and torment and then like continued that through their life. And I wondered, did they believe that was the source of their creativity? Because, a lot of people think that, oh, great songwriting comes from the pain that we've lived or experienced. Well, not necessarily so, because all of us have the ability to put ourselves into something and imagine what that's like and perhaps draw on some similar emotions. So I don't actually buy into that, but maybe they did. So yeah, it was just a great example of someone who had just held on to all of that baggage for all of that amount of time, you know.
Well, and it's so interesting. Well, again, a public facing career too, right? There
Yes,
is
yeah,
kind of a danger of changing, right? We all know those musical artists. They're like, oh, they're good. Their recent stuff isn't as good as their old stuff,
yeah,
but there are artists who will change and grow, based on their experience. So how
mm,
interesting that there was somebody who stayed
mm,
the same. You've
yeah,
changed, but
yes,
they were
yeah,
still in that same mode. But I
yeah,
think in any career, like a lot of people or even just relationships and whatever, some people get stuck on success. They're like, this is it. I found the formula. Or, well, didn't we have a whole episode about how do you measure success, right? And they were like, nope,
Yeah.
I'm not going to mess with this, right? Like, I don't want to step out into the unknown. I don't want to try something new. Like, I've got it. This is it. And then they just cruise on until, well, the physical self is ready to go. That was kind of a dark way to end that. Sorry about that.
But part of that is also that, I mean, yes, there's a public persona to that, but as an intuitive, as a healer, that when we look at people now, we see beyond that. Like, we're able to pick up, and a lot of people watching this as well will be able to perceive those energies that a person is functioning from. And so you kind of can see beyond that mask a little bit, because to me, it's like it's written all over them, things that maybe someone else can't see, but I know you know what I mean. You just get a sense of, oh, there's that belief, oh, there's that bit of baggage or whatever it is. And it's not from judgment, it's just from awareness of what that person is presenting energetically, as well as the image. And I will just say too, this is not someone who's been a lot in the foreground. They've been more in the background. I don't want to say who it is because I don't want to make a judgment of that person, but this is someone who has been more in the background, with little bits sort of coming forward more into the foreground. But yeah, it was just an interesting observation in terms of the baggage that we carry, and how long someone could actually hang on to that without really much growth that was perceivable. So
yeah, well, I mean, we could probably point to a whole bunch of different public figures, or even people that we know personally, who were like, man, if they just actually became a little more aware or tried to better themselves, like, wow, and they just won't. You can't force somebody to transform, no matter how ill they seem to be. And but that's also sort of a healer thing too. Like, oh, I see it. It's right there. I know, and I have the tools. Like, I can. But you can't have somebody. You can't force somebody to change. That's something else they have to choose. If they want to transform, they have to choose. And sometimes that first experience is big. It doesn't necessarily have to be dramatic, but is big. Like, from my own past, right? Like, before I started even looking into different alternative healings, and was doing EFT, and was getting acupuncture, and I've been trying antidepressants before that. But it took me quite some time before I even sought help with therapy, with just talk therapy. I had to get really, really depressed until I was like, you know what, enough. I'm not willing to be like this. This can't be it. This can't be what, I went through all of this schooling to do, is just to go to a miserable job, pay taxes, and die. I was like, no, I'm not willing to accept this anymore. What other options do I have? And that's what started my journey. So it's not, illness isn't necessarily a bad thing to move you, because I think we as humans, we get really comfortable. And so sometimes we need something to really push us out of that comfort zone. It's called the comfort zone for a reason. And sometimes illness is a really effective way to get somebody to take a step.
Absolutely. It becomes a catalyst for that change, but I don't think it has to be, or that it even will be in the future. My perception is that we're going beyond that, but it certainly has been a very instrumental way in how we have functioned in this reality in the past, that we've needed some sort of catalyst to almost like to kind of push us out of that comfort zone, because it's such a dense, heavy energy for us to be here. So it's easy to get stuck in it. So I definitely think that illness and all that stuff, when we get to that point where we're so uncomfortable, we can't take it anymore, we have to do something about it, or not, as the case may be. But yeah, my perception is that I'm less willing to choose that now than I was in the past. And I think as we gain more awareness, we do realize that we have the choice to change these things in a more empowered way, I think.
Yeah, and I think that is based on our experience, right?
Yeah.
And so when you're talking of, you know, these other beings from societies that are more evolved, um, we don't really know what that's like because that is outside of our experience. And
Exactly.
we
Yeah.
don't know what these generations that are coming up who of humans would, you know, what that would even be like, right? Like, well, in my
Yeah.
day, you had to suffer and you had to get sick. And
Yeah.
you kids don't know what it was like. If you had
Yeah.
it, you know, I would love to know what those. I could just kind of see the sitcom
Amazing.
now, like, oh, you know, there's
Yeah.
Grandma crotchety again about like, you know, what? Oh, is it your hip again? Yeah, you know, like we know how to fix these things. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it is funny, and we always look back at all the good old days. So I don't know if we'll be doing that with illness and suffering, but hey, who knows? Who knows?
Well, I mean,
But
there is a bit of nostalgia sometimes too.
yes,
You know,
because I think we kind of we love dramatic past experiences because we get that sense of achievement, like, yes, I did this and I've done things, and or like had, you know, been driving somewhere with my kids or whatever, and like, oh yeah, you know, this happened here or what, and they'll be like, Mum, you've told us that before, and I'm like, oh, okay, recycling the past a little bit here, you know what I mean? And they're not at all enthralled by it. They're nowhere near as excited about it as I am. So it's the same thing. It's the good old days story. So, you know,
well,
yeah,
and you may find that as your sons get older and you get older, they may want to cultivate those stories, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
then they'll have more experience that they're like, oh yeah, I'm doing that too. I'm remembering the good old days, like,
yeah,
and they'll want to you know, to have those family stories
yeah,
so that they can treasure them.
yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
just as not as often as I was telling them.
Yeah, or when you were telling them, right? Or
Yeah, yeah,
maybe that's just me, right? Like I've
yeah,
done a good deal of genealogy research for decades.
yeah,
So, you know, when there's a family gathering, I will sit with some of the older folks and be like, yeah, oh,
mm,
and then they'll mention people who are long dead. And I'm like, oh, I know exactly where they are in the tree, you know?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So maybe it's more of a personal thing for me that I love that history coming to life when people
yeah.
have those memories of talking about it.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, and
I
I
good.
agree. Sorry, go ahead, hon.
Oh, I was going to say I'm even remembering a story about my great grandfather, how he rallied a couple days before he died because he
Wow.
was really excited. It was right around the time that JFK, I forget whether it was
Mm,
when he was elected or when he was inaugurated,
yeah,
but he was really ill. And then he, you know, because people will do that. They'll rally a couple days before. You're like, oh,
yeah,
they turned a corner and this is it.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then, you know, they're all of a
yeah,
sudden they're gone. But
yeah,
yeah, so it was just like, oh, and I hadn't connected it. Like I knew the dates, but I hadn't connected that experience with the people who
yeah,
were contemporary to him because, you know, he died before you know,
mm,
before I was born. So, you know, it's fun things like that and like little personality things like that.
yeah,
You know, but and a lot of times it is around illness because like you said, it is dramatic
yeah,
and it is something that we write in our memories as humans. But like,
mm.
oh, you know, like even with well, we're getting close. I won't go off on that tangent. But yeah,
Right,
there's a lot of people who, you know, have come out the other side of an illness experience
yeah,
and then either want to ascribe meaning to it, like they're grateful for it. They're like, I never
yeah,
would have come to this realization. I never would have
without it,
had
yeah,
this experience without it. And
absolutely,
yeah, I think you and I are saying like, wouldn't it be great if you didn't need
mm.
that awful dip of an
Yeah,
experience in order to
yeah,
come out the other side of it with that
yeah,
same realization.
yeah, that we could just keep choosing more, greater, rather than having to go down the dip and then bring ourselves out of
Right.
it.
The trauma, the drama.
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, that is stepping into our true empowerment. That's being a true creator. Well, let me say, a conscious creator, rather than creating stuff unconsciously.
Right, because we're all creating all the time.
Exactly. And also, just to add one more thing in quickly, is to we were talking before about being able to perceive these energies and stuff in other people. And I think part of that, as we grow as more awakened and aware beings, is to also remember to be completely in allowance of people, because, as you said, we can't change what people are choosing, but nor do we need to have a judgment about it, because we're all here doing our own thing, whatever that may be. And what I've found myself, and even recently with a situation with my mum who has some illness, is the ability to be the more empowered I am, and then just being in her space and being willing to completely accept whatever she's choosing, the more awareness she is actually getting that she can make a choice, whatever that may be, and knowing that she'll be supported in that. So I think the ability to just meet people where they're at, but really be yourself, be that empowered energy, be that light, is what can actually help people make more conscious choices for themselves as well.
Yeah, that's lovely. And I will say that can be challenging depending on your relationship with whoever is ill and what that illness is and how that manifests. So always, you got to take care of yourself first. And again, you're manifesting your reality, you're manifesting that relationship. So yeah, you can't make yourself, all I will say is you can't make yourself more ill than whoever you're working.
Yeah, don't be doing that. Don't be taking their stuff on.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's a whole other thing.
That's a whole other story.
How often do healers do that? Like, oh my goodness. Yes. Anyway, this was great. Any other closing words? I'm so glad you shared that with
seems
about
like
your mom.
that sounds like a great place to leave it for today. So thank you to everyone for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Yep. All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye.